All right, here we are with another episode of the Grown Ass Women. I wanted to add another word in there. I was about to be like the grown ass fucking women, but I don't know if that's too much because I don't know what time people listening to this, and if it's at 7 o'clock in the morning, that might have been too much. So I apologize. Anyways, I'm so excited to be here with y'all today. And what's crazy is that we actually just saw each other last week as we celebrated Jonai's birthday. So happy birthday, boo.
Guys.
So excited to be here and to talk about our talks. We said we were going to come up with a theme, but we don't quite have a theme. We got some good stuff underway, whether it's the age to get married, stonewalling, religion in relationships. Y'all supposed to be doing this. You're not giving me no energy.
You know, you're doing such a great job, Deana.
Exactly. Let me get off from that mute. And
I'm gonna do the last one, so y'all better give some energy. Y'all ready for the last one?
Ready.
Divorce and when to leave.
Wow.
Yikes.
Oh, that's a good one, sis.
Yikes.
Sips tea.
Yikes.
And for those that are listening or watching, guess what the grown ass women are doing tomorrow? We skipping. Y'all remember skipping school and how much fun you had and all of that kind of stuff? See, the thing is, you don't know what day to day actually is. So you can't go report us to nobody bosses. You know what I'm saying? But let me tell you, tomorrow we gonna be together. We might do a little bit of work because we still bossy bitches, but we're gonna be with each other. I think we're gonna watch P-Valley. Y'all, we watching P-Valley?
Yeah.
Down in the valley where the
girls need to talk about it.
We do need to talk about it.
Yeah, we do. Ooh, Low Murder. Oh, y'all haven't seen it yet.
Not today.
We'll leave it there.
Oh, well, Dee is about to get all the way caught up. She about to see it all
the way.
So, and Yanni lives a little bit away from us, so we're gonna have to FaceTime you in so you could watch the P-Valley as well.
I'll be working, boo.
I mean, but do you know what? Let me not be a bad influence. Not
once you want to pay this mortgage, you want to help me out.
That's a great point.
It's a trade-off. I can do a trade-off and be like, F y'all.
I don't think I can do that. I don't think.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and, we got to get these schools open for the children to return. This is a very busy time in my world.
So they can get out the houses
for y'all too with kids. Y'all want them kids to go back to school. We have to be ready to bring kids to go back to school.
Jonai, were you about to say something? I saw you moving around.
Yeah. Y'all hear me?
It went in and out just now.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, I keep saying stuff and nobody's acknowledging what I'm saying.
We can hear you now.
Turn my mic up. Hello?
Yeah. Okay. It's up. Let's get started. All right. What is the age to get married? We have all of these different. I remember being a youngin'. So y'all tell me what it was for you. But I remember being a youngin', and I was first generation college student, right? And I remember talking to some of my classmates, and the girls would be like, yeah, I came to college for this good education. And I also came to find my husband because everybody at the time was very much straight. Now, about 5-10 years later, we saw all the people that had the curves that equaled the LGBTQ, right? So, but in college, everybody was living a straight life. Anyhow, everybody was like, I'm also coming to get my husband. And then I remember, falling in love with my kid's father and all that stuff and thinking that I should get married right afterwards. And I had a couple friends that actually did get married. We graduated 2002 and a couple of them got married like 2003, 2004. And at the time I was like, this is the right age, right? Because I was also having a kid at the time. But I'm thinking, what is the actual age to get married? On the flip, I have a homegirl who says that people shouldn't get married until they're in their 30s because they need a good 3 solid decades to find out who they are. But then I'm in my 40s, and I think I still see people in my friend groups that are still figuring out who they are. Like, so what's the right age and what are the contingencies? What do y'all think? What's the right age and what are the contingencies?
Well, one, I was not in college looking for a husband or thinking about marriage. So that might explain why I've been married twice. Because that was not me. I was not that person. I was, how am I going to be successful in my career? That was what I was thinking about. And oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to work every day. Yeah, but you know, the funny thing is about marriage, it was more for me, it was, well, if I wanted kids, if I did, I didn't want to have until after 30, but that's because of what my parents said, right? So it was always, so if you quantify it, let's say if you go to college, Rob, let's say you go to college, you graduate, you get your job, you're talking about mid-20s. Being in my 40s, I couldn't imagine in mid-20s having to be a whole wife and you know, that's a lot of responsibility. So I don't know if it really is an age versus just a place in life. But I actually agree with what you said. Someone said you need to be in your 30s. Now, my dad always said that, especially for guys, they should never get married before 35. Whoa. For that reason. Yeah, he said, man, guys just should not, because but they can apply to women as well, where it's the life experiences that you're going to have. Because think about it, you're not making money in college, so you're not able to travel, you know, with your friend. You're doing fun stuff, but like that real knowing how to live on your own, be independent, doing that stuff, that doesn't come until a little closer to 30, if you know, not full blown, possibly 30, but later on. So it's not so much a number, it's really about where you are, like the individual. Have you checked off? But think about back in the day, people were getting married at what, 16, 14?
Well, yeah, they were. And I just recently read a book called Take My Hand by Dolan Perez. What is her last name? Perkins, I think. Mm-hmm. Dolan.
It is.
It's Perkins. It's Dolan Perez Val. It's something along those lines. She has a hyphenated name. And she wrote Take My Hand, she wrote Bomb, and she wrote Winch, which is one of my favorite all-time books. But in that book, she brought highlight to the fact that people were having children really young and they were getting married really young subsequently. But that's because the purpose of marriage and the purpose of children was a little bit different than what it is for us now. Mm-hmm. And so even us having this conversation is a point of privilege for those elders and ancestors that came before us and paved this way. This wouldn't even be a conversation. Many of us would be grandmothers in our 40s, based off of how things used to go. My grandma was 34 when her first set of grandchildren were born. So I think it's really a matter of, then we have to think about, how do we define marriage and what is the purpose of marriage, right? Like once we start thinking about the purpose of marriage, then maybe it changes the age of which it's important to get married. Because if it's to produce children, then maybe people should do that when they're younger and they have, or whatever the case may be. But if it's for companionship, then maybe we should know who we are and then go into a marriage. You know, if it's for economic building and sustainability, maybe it doesn't matter as long as people are committed to growing together and putting their money together. So I guess that's another layer, a layer to it. Like, why do we get married? And then does that change the age piece a little bit? But there I go talking again.
I think, go ahead, Ayana.
Well, I was just going to say, as someone in this group who is not married and has not been married, I do feel like an opportunity is missed if you go to college where there is a large pool, right, of prospects, whether you're gay, straight, whatever. Like there's just a large, because there's lots of people in a similar situation in a concentrated group. And so I appreciate the idea, maybe not of I want to get married or I want to leave with my husband, but learning certain mindsets that put you in the right place. So say you don't get married before you graduate college, you're still getting married prior to 30, perhaps. And I think about that, especially in terms of Black women's fertility. And there's certain realities that come with that. You know, more and more often we're waiting later to have kids, but it's at the detriment of our fertility waning for various reasons that I think are also societally created. You know, it's biosociology, right? You know, the foods we eat, the care that we give, you know, systemic racism and stress, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like there's an opportunity that is missed if you're not at least in a certain mindset when you're in college, even if you don't leave with your husband. And that also goes with your definition of, do you need to be married? Like I go back to what you say, and also my mindset, I don't need to be married. I am perfectly comfortable not being married. Companionship, partnership, all of those things can happen outside of the bonds of marriage. And so I think what I would encourage women in college is to think about what they ultimately want, what they want for themselves versus what they want for their families, what they want for themselves versus what they want from society. And you can make a more informed decision. I will say I did not make any informed decision because I was taught marriage is bondage, marriage is slavery, never do it, never do it. And I think it was a disservice because I was like, you know, I ran in the opposite direction when I don't think that's the right answer either, because I ran in the opposite direction because of family expectations. And that doesn't serve you either. So I think because college is a place of learning who you are and what you want more and more, you have to explore both sides of the coin, or you're going to wake up in your 40s and be like, oh man, I wish I had thought about that 20 years ago. So.
And I guess there's something to be said about maybe to that point around resiliency, right? Like when you're in your 20s and you get heartbroken, you might be able to bounce back a little bit easier than when you're in your 40s and you get heartbroken, because you're like, damn, I'm not gonna keep on doing this, right? Like if you go through some hardships in, say, a marriage in your 20s, maybe it makes it a little easier to bounce back. I don't know. I'm just putting the idea out there because I see a lot of people getting into our age group as grown as women. And they're like, oh, you did that? Oh, okay, I'm out completely. And there's no element of resilience, and probably because we're rubber bands and our elastic has already been stretched when we were in our 20s and 30s, you know? But just something to kind of consider. I think, Dee, you were about to say something.
I think
it was Jonai.
Because I saw Dee lean back a little bit. I don't know. I was like, she about to bring this Aries fire to the conversation now. Go ahead, Mrs. Morse Carr.
I think growing up, I always the idea of marriage was always in my head. I think because that's what I grew up around. It wasn't my mom and dad divorced when I was a child. I do remember them being together, and then there was a short period of time where you know, both my parents were single. Then my dad remarried when I was still very young. So that's what I always saw. My grandparents were married until my grandfather passed, and we were just always surrounded by family. And I think I speak on this in a lot of our different discussions, but the idea of family has always been my motivation. And so of course, society and maybe the things around you, for me, as far as my parents, my father and my stepmother being married for most of my life, you're naturally taught that that's what you're supposed to do. I don't think that you always think about it. I don't know how much I actually sat down and mapped this whole thing out and like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to find my husband, da, 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 da. But I've always been very open to the idea of marriage and having kids. I definitely would have preferred to have kids much, much earlier. I actually think it's better that way. If you have that mindset, if you have that support, there's a lot of things that come with that, with having kids at an early age. But for me, because of what I grew up around, is a supportive family, I always felt like, man, I should have had kids earlier. I could have had the support. I would have finished. I know I would have finished school. I think I would have probably even pushed myself a little harder because I had a family and because I had the support. So I think that's always been my mindset. As I've gotten older, I learned that, well, I think that I could be single, but I do want companionship. But I don't think that you have to be married to have companionship. For me, it is more so the what do you call it? The legal aspect of it. For to be with somebody who can make decisions, to be with somebody who is just a part of your estate. And I know you can do that anyway by way of other types of paperwork. It doesn't have to be marriage. There are other legal documents to be able to do that. But today, those are more of my concerns. If you're going to be with somebody and spend all your time with them and spend your money and have kids and do all these things, then I feel like if you've made the decision for that to be your person, then they should be privy to whatever you have, in some way.
Oh, so you don't believe in prenups?
Not for myself, because I don't have enough to have a prenup. So that's how I feel. That's how I feel. So now if I was, making millions and trillions of dollars, and my other half was not equal to what I'm doing, then possibly I'm not against it. I think it's more so, I think when you're in a relationship, even if you are the person, out doing the events, out doing all the talking, whomever you're with should be your support system in some way. And so I think maybe a prenup to protect whatever you may have had prior to that person. And especially if you have kids outside of that person. I think that's different. But for someone like me, I don't have any kids. We own this house together. I've got a little something that's my own that I brought to the marriage. But to me, it's, she can have that shit. So, if things change, if my wife just became a bum and then I became this mega star or something, then we might just have a problem altogether there, for any type of prenup, because there might not be a marriage. But
That's gonna lead to our last topic.
The elements to when you get married, if you get married, why you get married. And that can be different for everybody. I think the thing is, if you and your partner are on the same page. So if you're more like, I'm married because I'm so in love with this person, it doesn't matter who you are and what you do, we're gonna make it through, and love never fails. If both of you all have that mindset solely, usually you grow out of that a little bit. But some people are like that forever because they're just so free and I don't need all these worldly things and whatever. That's awesome, as long as you both are on that same page. But if you have one person that's just so in love, I'm so in love, and the other person is like, ma'am, this is a business here. this is a business. It is. With a whole lot of love. So I think as long as whomever you're with, as long as you all are on the same page, marriage can be whatever you want for whatever reason it is. This is my mindset today. Before, I grew up in the church as well. So, all the things you're taught in church, but I where I have free reign now to have my own thoughts and ideas and based off a lot of my experiences, I feel differently. I think it's for you, but you do it how you want to. And if you want to do it early, I don't see anything wrong with it. I know you get married, you don't plan to get divorced when you get married. However, if you do, it's not the end of the world. Like, it's just as another experience. So whatever happens, you learn from it. Whether it turns out good and you stay married forever and ever and ever, you're going to learn throughout the whole process. If you get a divorce a year and a half later, I hope you learn something from all of it and just keep going. 25 or 45.
I did. I learned.
Somebody talking to you directly. Go ahead,
Oh.
D.
Whatever.
Like he said,
Making confessions.
remember in the text message yesterday, and I hadn't updated Nikki's last name.
Child,
Right.
and she got on you, or then she, I was like, yikes.
Sorry, girl.
No, Jay, I think you made a good point. I think people have to define what they want marriage to be and be on that same page together. I grew up believing in marriage, obviously, well, not obviously, but in the church as well. And then I would say that I didn't recognize that my examples of marriage were probably dysfunctional. Now, as an adult, I can look back and look at some of those things and some of those thoughts that I had about marriage and some of that imagery that is absolutely false and absolutely not what I want. Had I gotten married at 26, that was my magical age when I was young. Don't ask me why. I thought that was the age I had it all planned out. I would have replicated what I saw. I would have replicated what I saw and probably wound up divorced. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think we're bringing up a lot of good points that make a lot of sense with us now being in our 40s and stuff. But I think back on when we were in our 20s, like, were we actually, okay. Can I finish this one statement, Yanni?
Yeah, that's why I didn't say anything. I just phrased it because I didn't want to interrupt you.
We think about, like, even I think D and Ayana just said, or excuse me, D and Jonai just said, like, defining marriage together. And I'm thinking in our 20s, like, did we know enough to make that kind of decision? Like, because in our 20s, to the point that you just made, Jay, and also D, we were still shedding off some of the elements of socialization. Like, we were still shedding off some of the ideas that have been placed on us. And I don't know if we always had the original idea to create marriage, you know, and I had kids young, right? So I want to say that for me, having kids was very different than the idea of getting married, because the kids are who you create them to be until there's a point that they're not. And they come in and I don't believe in a clean slate child or anything like that. I think they have their own personalities. But I think it's a little bit different as opposed to being with another adult. Like, do you know enough about yourself and life at 22, at 24, at 27 to have a conversation with somebody and say, this is what we are going to be doing for the next 50 years. And while I know our parents and grandparents did that, well, not mine, because, you know, my people, they from the streets, they didn't do all that. But while that may have happened for some, people were also getting married and staying in the same neighborhoods and in the same cities or the same states that their families were in. So they had that support and they had those conversations and those role models. And it was just an expectation. But now that's not the case. So if I saw a 23-year-old that came to me and she was like, all right, doc, I'm about to get married, I'd be like, oh, hold up, Slim. Like, what you know about yourself before you want to 100% deeply involve that with somebody else. You know, there's all these factors that have shifted where I actually, and will say very clearly that I am okay with my children having children in their 20s. I am not necessarily okay with them getting married in their 20s.
So the reason I rose my hand, because I think connecting to exactly what you just said is this antiquated notion in my mind that you have to be married forever, right? And that they're just like you know people for seasons, you have friends for seasons, you have seasons of your life. There is something to be said for, you could be married to someone for a season and then that season ends, and it doesn't have to be traumatic. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to end up with you can't standing each other. I think of your situation, LaNail, like if you had married your children's father.
I'd have been
And
locked
then
up, B.
ultimately,
I'd
but
have been
ultimately,
incarcerated.
but if you had married him with the intent of, we want to start this family, if you got divorced 10 years later, okay, you had your family, you fulfilled the purpose of getting married at 20x with this person. And I'm not married, so I'm not advocating to be married, but I want people to think about, it's okay to not be married forever. And I think a lot of us fall into this trap of, well, I have to find this right person and it has to be perfect and the stars have to align and, till death do us part. And it's like, that's not actually what needs to happen. Even in biblical times, if your husband died, if your husband left you, you're like, the brother of your husband would just go ahead and marry you so you wouldn't be by yourself. So kind of alluding to what Jonai said, it was much more to it than, oh, I just love this person and I want to be together forever. And so maybe there is value we can find there. I'm not saying we should go back to biblical times because that did not work out for women often. But what I am saying is that we don't have to have this antiquated notion that I got married at 22. We had 3 kids. It didn't work out. Next, or I'm moving on to the next chapter. And it doesn't mean you're like a relationship that ended doesn't mean it's a failed relationship. It just ended and it didn't work out for whatever reason. So I think, I would be okay if my son got married young and had kids young, because I'm like, if you need to get out, you can. We're not bound by these restrictions or even social need to stay married forever.
That's
and Nikki has her hand raised. So I know she got something to say on that subject.
That's so true, Yanni. That you're right. You're so right about that. Like you're making me want to backpedal a little bit from that statement of not wanting them to be married in their 20s. And that is with the idea of marriage being forever, which goes against a lot of things that I normally say, because I do believe every relationship is a reason, season, or lifetime, and marriage is not exempt from that. So you're right. I'm gonna take some time and think. I might have a different answer in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's interesting. But that slope of, or that path of, so going into my first marriage, because I had both sides of the spectrum. I had the spectrum of, this is forever, right? And then I had the spectrum of, oh, well, you know what? If it doesn't work, I'll be okay, right? Because I've been married, got through a divorce. It was great. The downside to the not thinking that it doesn't have to be forever is you might stay too long, right? And go through some really traumatic stuff, because marriage is supposed to be forever, right? But then the downside to doesn't have to be forever, season, reason, is that you may not try as hard, to the point, LaNail, you made earlier, that the older you are when you get married or get in these committed relationships, the less likely you are to really go through anything in life that is not an absolute necessity. And a marriage, when you're more mature, is not the necessity. Having income, having companionship, but marriage in itself may not necessarily be, I wouldn't consider that to be a need. It's more of a want, right? Unless you decide to live a life where you need the financial support of someone else, or maybe you have some sort of disability that you need someone, but even that doesn't have to be marriage. It could be other things. So, I think there's pros and cons to the perspective. Like on one side, it's like, great, but you may end up walking away too soon, or going into a marriage not really doing the work first to examine if this is right, because if it doesn't work, I can just leave, right? Yeah. Especially if there's no kids involved. Or you go into a marriage and still not do the work, thinking, okay, I really love this person, and that's enough, and this is going to last forever. As y'all hear me joke and say, you got 2 options. We either going to be together or you're going to be with me. So what you going to do with that? And I joke, but I don't. But it depends, right? It really depends. So I think it's to the point that I think all of us have been saying, you have to understand who you are. right? You really have to understand what you want and who you are. You know, what is that? What does marriage mean to you? You know, and that kind of circles back to the age piece where some people know who they are in their mid-20s and can stand in that. And there's slight variations as they get older, but not many. Where some people, you know, can be in their 40s and 50s just figuring it out because they walked in a certain path or went too soon or had these experiences that prevented them from really finding out who they are and what they did and didn't like. So, you know, I've been on both ends, and then now back in the end where I'm like, no, if I get married again, I want to be with this person forever. So we're gonna have to figure it out, right? But in the back of my mind now, there's that, well, it can't be this and it can't be that and it can't be this again. But now it's like a meeting of the minds. It's I want to be with this person forever, but I also am not going to destroy myself, you know, emotionally, physically, you know, all these other things, these boundaries, to do that. Devastating, yes. So yeah, that's a tough one. I still think it depends on the person.
Well,
I think,
go ahead, Jay. Sorry,
I was gonna say, I think you know, it still goes back to, I think there's always this subconscious, even though, you know, we're more in the I do what I want lifestyle, you know, 2022. I do what I want, I feel what I want, I go where I want, my spirituality is whatever I said, you know, whatever I do right for me, I get to pick and choose and whatever. And so I do think that there is sometimes a small battle between you know, what you knew and where you're trying to go as an individual today. So there are times where you might try to stick it out because that's just what you were taught, because you still have in the back of your mind, I got married till death do us part. Even though you might not be in the church, you might not care about the Bible or whatever, but that's where most of us came from. Yeah. And so I know there's a lot of times this small twinge, even though we do it when we're not married too, we just keep holding on and one more try, motherfucker, you know.
That's the clip right there, LaNail.
That's it. Okay, that's the clip. One more try, motherfucker. Okay, I got it.
Institution of marriage that has been ingrained in us. Like you said, especially if you don't have kids with this person, or you know, you essentially just have a marriage, which was the same as being my companion or my girlfriend or my boyfriend or whatever. Sometimes we subconsciously may have been ruined for the time being by what we were taught. So just trying to suppress that, but we all know it's deep down in our toes, you know, which is one of those things that just probably just keeps you being like, all right, and embarrassment, to spare your parents, because a lot of these things we do for our families because we're taught and that's what we think is the right thing to do. And I don't want to be alone, and you know, all these other things. So I think ultimately I wish that, you know, some powerful bolt just comes down and, you know, hits us with a ray of clarity and, you know, do it how you want to do it, and, you know, try not to live with any regrets. You know, things happen for a reason, and if this is not, you know, if it doesn't work out, okay, like accept it, be accountable for it, and keep it moving, because somebody else is out there. Don't stay here because you think you're going to be by yourself. Don't not do this because you think you're too old. Don't not do this because you think you're too young. Like, just do it. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I do make my judgmental faces. Like,
I saw it too.
19, you don't need to be getting married to nobody. You know, have sex barely. So, you know, take care of yourself. But if that's what you decide to do it till you can't. So,
right. You saw us laugh because you said just do it while you wearing that Nike sweatshirt and Nikki got hers on too. You see how socialization and branding works? We hear just do it
We
and
need
we
to call
automatically think
Nike.
of a Nike swoosh. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. You know, I wouldn't want Jordan to get married or have kids, either of those. But that's because of, I think, my own experiences, right? I want
Wait, you mean you didn't put a
Ever?
time on that? You just
young,
said
young, like in her 20s, like the mid early
oh,
20s.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Because we be manifesting too, and so don't be setting Jordan up like that.
Oh, in her early 20s, in her
Okay.
early 20s. No, I want her to, because she asked, what do you want to be, Jordan? I want to be a boss. All right. And not that she can't if she does those things, but you know, I think it's honestly, if it wasn't for the legal parts of marriage, I'd probably be like, oh, let's get married, let's hurry up, let's go. But you know, the paperwork aspect of marriage definitely makes it a little bit less attractive when you've been divorced, you know, because there's just so much to it. But
that idea of being a boss goes back to my thought around having kids early then, right? Because I think that what I see is people prolonging having kids because they want to be a boss. Then they get into their 40s and they are a boss, and now they're afraid to have kids because because they're now competing with people who are in their 20s and such that are trying to come up in the ranks. And it's like, well, if I'm a boss and I go on maternity leave for 6 months or whatever the case may be, I'm gonna come back and I'm not gonna have my position anymore, and I'm gonna be fighting in these different kind of ways versus maybe having kids young and those kids are growing up while you're also growing in your career. You know what I mean? It's interesting too, because clearly my 5 minutes have passed when I said I was going to change my mind. And I go back to my original thought that I don't want my kids to get married in their 20s. But I am very much okay with them having kids in their 20s. And I know that that's different, but I don't think that you have to be married in order to have kids, which then takes us to the point Ayana was talking about earlier in terms of maternity and fertility, especially for Black women. I spoke to a woman the other day, and she was like, B, I want to have a baby, my first baby, but I'm scared as hell of dying because of the Black mortality rates, right? Black mother mortality rates. So maybe then we add to the conversation of, if you don't, do you have to get married to have kids? And what about start giving the messaging to young Black people about saving their eggs? Like, instead of saying get married in your 20s because that's when your eggs are the most fertile, or whatever the case may be, why don't we say save your eggs, make that part of your investment plan, right? So we invest, we're telling 20-year-olds to buy stock, we're telling 20-year-olds get property and real estate as early as they can. Why not start telling 20-year-old Black women, go ahead and say those eggs, sis, and then you do whatever you want, right? And so then you're not in your 40s having 20 years of adulthood with success, and the first time you experience a major negative decline is the moment that a doctor tells you that you can't have a baby, right? Like, why don't we start investing in our future through our eggs and through the storage of our eggs? And therefore we take off the pressure of having to be married in our 20s.
Right. Or just even the pressure of that biological clock and what your body is doing, just investing in yourself and reserving. Y'all know my eggs are frozen. So I like to say I have preserved the right to have a child when I get ready, period. If I want to wait, well, I don't think they'll do it after 50, but if I want to wait to 45, 47, I can do that. Because I was fortunate enough to be able to plan ahead. So absolutely, we absolutely need to do that for ourselves. I mean, it needs to be like an option in our benefits packages and these corporations and things.
And and at that point you can have a surrogate. So you don't have to think about, what stage your body is in, at whatever age. And by then you would have had, you've had your career and you can afford to pay somebody to carry the baby.
Exactly.
I truly think that is brilliant, LaNail, and I never thought about it. But the same way we are intentionally teaching financial planning, we are intentionally teaching investing and property, etc. Like, yes, save your eggs. Like, because like Dee said, even if you're 45, your eggs are still 25, right? And so you are buying yourself time. Like when you think about that one commodity that does not renew, it's time. But you, this point, you are literally able to buy yourself time to have a baby, like Dee said, when you're fucking ready, rather than feeling like, oh, I got pregnant at 20, whatever, I should keep this baby because maybe I can't get pregnant at 30, whatever. So that's a really powerful thought process. And I want to say, as someone who has a boy child, I wonder what this, I think about what this translates to my son. Or and maybe it doesn't, because men are able to preserve their fertility and they have a lot more options when it comes to getting older, either from the biological perspective or the societal perspective. But I do think it's interesting to think about what we teach our boys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you all think about telling your kids? So you know how lesbian couples or you know, any gay couple, you kind of co-parent with other couples sometimes, or with someone that's a friend and not necessarily your companion. I like what you said, LaNail, about, you know, I'm okay with my kids having kids in their 20s, but not necessarily being married. I mean, I think that's an option. You know, you have a best friend and you guys want to come from great families, and this is just something that you want to do together.
Yeah.
It almost crazy coming out of my mouth, but I think that could be a thing. I mean, because if you can get on board and you have a plan, and I think you have to have a certain mindset though. You have to be a certain kind of person. You know, there are certain people that I would not advise to do that. But then there's some people that are very mature and actually know what they want at a young age. And it might not necessarily be to be with someone else right now. Yeah. I don't worry about another adult, you know, because now I'm taking care of a baby and essentially another adult.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what's interesting about that from a therapeutic perspective, in our training and my experience in working with couples that are married tend to experience the first major conflict in their marriage right after the baby is born, right after their first child is born. And usually it's because people have been conditioned and reinforced in that marriage to give a lot of attention to their spouse. And then a baby comes and people redefine who they are. You're no longer just this hot, cute mom or person. You're now a mom, right? Or you're not this free, or whatever the case may be, people define for their fathers. You're not that, you're a father. And the attention shifts and the identity shifts and people aren't talking about it. I do think that there's something to be said around the idea of maybe having a baby with a best friend who may be a different gender, as opposed to, again, putting pressure that it has to be this lifelong partner, or it has to be this person that you're gonna love forever and stuff like that, because that's just not realistic. And right now, and I think we're setting people up by keeping the narrative that you have to get married and then you have to have kids and it has to be people that you love and it has to do all of that, because then people are staying in abusive marriages and people are losing who they are in their identities, and they're coming out of these marriages worse than when they entered into the marriage. And I think that's really counterproductive to what the Bible, as we mentioned the Bible, than what the Bible actually wanted, or what God actually wanted for us, not to lose ourselves and to experience all of this additional damage because we're trying to meet the pressures of society or whatever the case may be. So I think that's also a revolutionary idea, Jonai, of maybe you should be thinking about having a baby with somebody who you've already established a really fun and loving and supportive friendship, as opposed to making it seem like it has to be something else. Equally so, it's challenging, equally so, because people change after they had that baby, but your friends still tend to stay the same, but your spouse is likely gonna change. And that's just after years of doing couples counseling and such. So Nick, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think because of the change in times, but I would still want Jordan to be married. I would. I'd have to say I would still want her to be married. And for me, it's because of that present physical presence of emotional support. Or, whether it's if not married, have like a lifelong companion, whatever that is, right? If she were to choose to marry a man or woman, someone that is in the home, because it is difficult. It is hard, being the sole provider for a child, emotionally, physically, financially, and just, wanting that for her, just to have that balance when one parent is really upset and the other is just to have that. I think I would still want that for her. Part of it is because of how I grew up. Another part is knowing what, I didn't have and what I see that she could have really benefited from by having, that balance. And I'm a Libra, so, I like balance. So
you done said it about 4 times, and then you said on one side and on the other
Yes.
side, and on this side you pointed. And I was like, Lord, if the people in the audience who's listening don't know, Nikki is a Libra.
Need that balance. It has to all balance out. There can be a high, but there better be a low to compensate.
There's still your best friend is your companion. Isn't that still some sort of balance if you all have that understanding? We all know of someone who, probably several people, but who co-parents with a best friend, opposite sex, and they pretty much divide up their time. Of course, I mean, generally there's always going to be one that does a little bit more, that has them a little bit more often.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they pretty much divide up their time. And from the outside in, it seems amazing. And then they also have whomever that parent is with. It might not be the parents together, but they're essentially one big
spouse. Yeah. It depends. It's more of a preference, because I know people that co-parent beautifully. Nothing wrong with the kids, they're not missing. It's more of a preference. Like if I had a preference, that's what I would want for her first. The next one would be, if you're not going to be physically together, to have an amazing co-parenting relationship. All right. And that, that could be the friendship, the best friend. It could be, but I think, when you think about the perfect world for your kids, the perfect world, if I could frame it for her, would be to have that in the home, healthy relationship, either marriage or co-parenting. But then, I have seen where it still works to not be in the home and have this wonderful, do a wonderful job of raising kids. I think it's a matter of no different than, if you had a preference for nothing terrible, your child would never get in the car. It's just a preference in how you would like their life to go. Like, I prefer for her to go to college, but what if she wants to learn a trade? And if she wants to be a cosmetologist, and it's like, all right, well, my preference was this, but if this is the route you're going to go, then we'll go that way. And I support you. So.
Yeah, for sure.
So go ahead, Jonai.
Another thing that and this is kind of, I'm going back a little bit, but not too far off. A lot of folks get married too because they think that means you're not going to leave them. And back to the biblical, till death do us part. I know I'm going to have somebody. If we're married, you're not leaving. So I've been thinking about that the whole time. So I just need to get that out.
That's great. Yeah,
And the baby piece. You hear people actually say, I'm gonna get married and then I'm gonna have this baby, and then that's the investment plan. And the thing is that's okay, because that's probably how they've been socialized, because that's what worked for their mom and worked for their grandmom and worked for their great grandma. And I've been working with clients and telling them, they feel guilty or bad that they're breaking particular cycles or behaviors that their people taught them. And I'm like, but our grandmothers taught us how to ride a bike. only because that's the only thing they knew how to do was ride a bike. And they didn't think we were going to have cars. They didn't think we was going to be able to drive cars. They taught us based off of what they knew and only what they knew and what made sense in the context of how they were growing up. And and if we continue in certain behaviors that don't make sense in our current environment, we are dooming ourselves. They taught us certain things because they wanted us to be successful. And in being successful, that sometimes means we have to do things differently. You can't take the skill of riding a bike into the car because you're going to crash, right? So it's really a matter of taking these intentions that our grandparents and our parents and our great grandparents, or even our ancestors that whispers these things to us, taking those intentions and making something new about it, and not necessarily feeling like we have to do it the ways that other people told us to do it, because that only made sense for them based off of the access that they had, based off of the environment that they were in, based off of what they thought we were going to experience, not knowing that we were going to have all of this other stuff ahead of us, right? And all these other opportunities and things like that. And so I think that helps clients that I'm working with to understand that you're not disrespecting the elders by doing something different. And you don't have to call it breaking a cycle if it was not negative. You just get the opportunity to do something different because you're in a different environment with different options and different access, of which they trailblazed for you to have. You know?
I think in some ways it would bring them joy that you can do X, because they did not have the opportunity. Like when I think about my own family, my mother was so excited for me not to be married because, you know, in her generation, it was not an option. And she is like, you have the option to not do this. And unfortunately, you know, it was embedded in trauma and not exactly the best way to go. But at the same time, it highlights what you're saying, right? Like, they taught us what they knew because it's what they knew. You have brand new information. And when you have new information, you can make new decisions. I wanted to briefly go back to something Nikki said, because I think what's important when we evolve as a society, when we evolve as Black women, you know, Nikki's a Libra and she mentioned it. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm a rebel by nature. I am perfectly comfortable being outside of what society thinks is, you know, normal, right, etc. But I will say, there is truth to the statement about being a single parent, being a bitch. Like, and if I could, I would find somebody, man, woman, I don't care at this point, come and live at my house and help me. Just right. And it's the day to day. It's the emotional. It's the fact that he's in a living room, probably destroying it with pizza and, you know, Fruit Loops on the floor because I can't be there. But if someone else was just in the house, you know, that would have that balance. So I think there is some reality to, again, like we're teaching our girls, invest in your future with these eggs. Know that you can make all these different choices. You could be married, you could be unmarried, you could be this, you could be that. There is a consequence, a natural consequence to absolutely every decision you make.
Yeah.
And if you enter this co-parenting relationship, yes, that person might be around, but they're not always there day to day. They're going to have their own life, right? They're going to have their own time. So something comes up and they're not immediately able to come over and, you know, pick up the kid or sit with the kid. You have to deal with that. When the daycare calls, so-and-so has to go home because they have a fever. Can you pick up so-and-so? No. Guess what? You need to do it. And what's interesting is even in same-sex couples, you know, et cetera, or co-parenting relationships, it usually falls onto the person who is gendered as the mother, right? You know, so even if you're in a same-sex couple, there's somebody's going to be seen as the mother, right? And that responsibility typically falls to you. So, you know, we're talking about women mainly, but also, you know, just people who are gendered as the mother. And I think we have to be realistic. Again, I wish in college someone was realistic about me, like understand all of your choices, as exhaustive of a list as you can, because you don't know all of them. understand what those consequences of your choices may be and make a better informed decision. Maybe you do want to marry this knucklehead and have these kids because you know what? He'll be in the house. He can help you raise them until a point of independence. And then you're like, all right, bet, leave. Like, again, we talk about reason, season, like it might be a reason that man might be there, that person might be there just to help you raise those kids until those kids get to an independent space.
Right.
So I just wanted to say that.
With that, it's also, I guess, essentially what you're saying too, is to let your child know that whatever decision is made, you can change your mind. Like it, work, stick it out, tough it out, try to work it out until you just can't. You generally know when you can't do it anymore and when this is not healthy. We just continue to keep doing it for the just in cases. But I think if we instill in young women and men, that it's okay. It's okay. Like if you're going to do this, don't feel like you have to stay in this because you think that I'm going to feel a way about you, or you feel like you're going to be judged for making a mistake or whatever it is. Of course, I want you. I'm gonna give you my idea of what the best decisions could be, or what could lead you to making some better informed decisions or whatever. But ultimately, it's your experience, and you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do regardless. Hopefully, I was able to provide some good insight. But whatever you do, know that if it becomes a mistake at some point, or if there are some severe challenges, that it's okay. Like I'm not going to think different of you, or so you believe the world. People judge you because they got issues, right? So I think that needs to be taught too. Like, what is judging? Why do people do it? What does it mean? All that stuff. So just allowing people to know that it's okay to be who you are and make mistakes while you're figuring it out.
And it may not even be a mistake. It may be the lesson you're supposed to learn, or that reason, or that season, right? Like, and it may not even require a change of mind. It's just a new decision because you evolved and you get to do something different. And I think that is such a great point that we should be teaching our children and our nieces and nephews and godchildren, all the young people that are in our lives, not just as babies and kids, but even those that are in their 20s or 30s and shortly behind us, right? Like it is absolutely 100% okay to increase your own awareness and make a decision based off of that clarity and insight, that you don't have to stay in a position based off of something you knew or thought 5 years ago. And think something different now, so you can do something different now. And I think that that's important. Oh man, we lost Jay. I guess she's gonna come back.
And I was gonna ask, is that a pink Target cup?
Where? Jonai's?
Yeah, she was drinking, and I was like, oh, I have one.
Do we want to? So we have a little bit of time left. Do we want to go right into divorce and stay on the marriage topic, or do we want to go into stonewalling or religion and relationships? I'll say that religion and relationships to me is not just about marriage. That is also about friendships, relationships, also in parenting, as we identify parenting, and also as we identify role reversal in parenting too. So I think in the last year, oh shoot, it's all of us. In the last year, we have all had a position where we had to role reverse with our own parents, where we had to look at our parents like, so you need to have a seat and don't open this door unless I tell you that somebody can come in, and close my refrigerator door because you letting all the food spoil. We all have had that role reversal, and I'm sitting here looking at y'all because y'all my best friends, and I know everybody's story, because we all know everybody's story. But I'm wondering if we should pause that one to next time, because I think that that's going to have layers to it, and either go into stonewalling or go into
divorce. Stonewalling can cause divorce. I'll tell you that much.
I think divorce is probably
Yeah,
the
divorce.
natural.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I feel like it's a
progression of
natural
the company.
progression.
Yeah,
of it.
divorce
Yeah.
is a natural progression.
So
It's yeah.
to the people that's listening or watching, although I am talking a whole lot, these topics come from all of us. They're not just my topics. So which one of y'all said y'all want to talk about divorce and when to leave? Because okay, there you go. Come on.
Clearly.
Yeah, of course. Of course I brought up. So it wasn't just divorce for me, it was divorce slash like time to leave.
Mhm.
Right? It's that concept. So it's not just marriage. It's that, what and we've kind of talked about, divorce as it or not being together when it comes to parenting, but just you make a commitment to someone, right? And you love this person, you make a commitment to them. That's like a promise, and I always remember when we're young and people will say, oh, I'd never let somebody do this, or oh, I would leave. And then you get some years under your belt and you realize, oh shit, okay, no, that actually did happen and I didn't leave.
Mhm.
Right. And so, just kind of looking at what are those hard lines actually that say, you know what, if this is crossed, this is it, because it's not always infidelity. It's not
'Cause
always
sometimes we
abuse.
just want to watch, but I'll leave that alone.
As we
Wow.
grown ass women.
Yeah,
Shout out to all our watchers.
exactly.
On our next episode of Grown Ass Women, we will be dissecting Dr. Plummer wanting to watch.
That's why I got these glasses. I want to see.
Damn. Now that is the Instagram clip. I just want to watch.
Guys, we just want to watch.
Just want to watch. No, but we talk about, think about the things that we said in our young 20s, right? Our early 20s, mid 20s, where we said we would not have happen in our relationships, or we would not put up with, and look at now, almost 20 years later, and think, oh, has that changed? Like, do you still have the same lines and same boundaries for what would make you leave, whether it's a marriage or a lifelong commitment? What would make you leave? Are those lines still the same? The boundaries still the same? Because as we mentioned earlier, that first relationship or that first time, you might have worked through it and be like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. I love this person. But then the next one, those lines have gotten a little thicker. Like, no, I don't have time for this. I'm not going through this again, even though it's a different person, different set of circumstances. So that's what I was thinking about when I thought about divorce, or just, when to leave, or what are those lines and boundaries, and do they change over time? They get thicker, thinner.
Yeah. Jay, did you hear the question? I know you missed some of the context, but it sounds like the question is, when we're thinking about divorce, does it change? What are the factors that makes a person want to leave? What are the factors that confirms that it's time for a divorce? And do those factors change over time? Did I capture that right, Nick?
Yeah, but not just divorce, because not everyone has been married, but we've all been in serious relationships, like very deep, emotional, spiritual, mental relationships.
And for clarity, we're talking about with an intimate partner, not with
Yes,
friendships.
with an intimate partner. Although if it goes in the direction of friendship, the principles are still the same.
The principles are still the same. They're still the
Yep.
same to me.
They
and,
are,
and
yeah.
I know that's because I'm in my 40s now, and there are many parallelisms for me between marriage and my closest friends. I mean, like people that you just kick it with every now and then, be like, whatever. But like your closest friends, there's a parallelism there.
That's a whole topic.
Right. Do Ayana or D, y'all want to kick off, or Jay?
Okay, if no one says anything.
So the reason I didn't respond, I don't know the right answer to that. I'm one of those people that I can't, like, certain things I can forgive again and again, or I can change my perspective on. So I think most people know that, I'm in this vaguely polyamorous thing, and we're not really together, right? But in my 20s, I would not have imagined that like someone could have a whole other partner. I'd be like, that has nothing to do with me, right? Or I don't care.
Yeah.
So I think it is situational, Nikki. Like,
Yeah.
maybe when you're younger or in a different phase of life, your limits and boundaries will be different than when you're older and you recognize, you know what, I don't need a partner to be my everything, right? I don't need that partner to be, around me all the time. And I actually am not worried about what you're doing when I'm not around. But that depends on your situational place in life.
Yep.
I think you have to truly examine, is this relationship causing you more harm than good? I think to me, it's even in, whether, like you said, it's infidelity, it's this, it's finances, it's lying, it's gambling, it's drinking or addiction. It could be anything. You have to decide what your limit is to causing harm, right? And so just because I can think of, my friend, like it is infidelity in the classic sense, right? Because, we are not each other's only partner, but that's not my limit, right? Because honestly, as long as everybody's clear, we understand, we have our relationship, it doesn't bother me. But if he came in and like stole $50 from my purse, I might have a different problem, right? Because you're lying and you're thieving, and I can't stand that. So I think it's so highly personalized, but I'm interested to hear what other people say, because again, I'm not a traditionalist in that way, but I'm just like, when it causes harm, it's gotta go.
You bring up
Harm is not the same for everybody.
You bring up a good point there, Yanni, that which then has me thinking, I don't know if y'all saw me taking a note. That's the therapist in me that's like, ooh, I'm gonna write that down, right? But it has me thinking that then means that an individual has to prioritize themselves more than they prioritize their spouse, and more than they prioritize the institution of marriage, more than they prioritize socialization and societal pressure. And that goes against who we have been taught to be as Black women. We have been constantly taught to prioritize everybody else over ourselves. I told you guys quickly, I had that dream about Alyssa the other day where I was about to hurt. In the dream, I could have potentially hurt myself in order to save her, right? And that is how we've also been socialized as mothers. That may also just be an instinct, but it takes this idea that in order to say, you have harmed me and therefore I am leaving, it means that you have to see yourself at a higher level than you see that person. And you have to see yourself at a higher level than you see marriage. And that, although it sounds simple, is not what many Black women do.
Yes, and I was going to say that not only that you're not always at that point in your life. I dated a guy who literally broke every boundary that I ever had, that I ever thought about, that I also have them now. But I wasn't in a place where I prioritized myself over being with someone at the age that I was, over what people would say, over just the relationship. I wasn't in a place within myself. So I dealt with a lot of things that I probably wouldn't now. And that I've said in the past that I wouldn't. So you have to be in that space where you're like, my health is more important. My peace of mind is more important. I am more important than this thing that we have going on.
Which then takes us back to the original question around when you should be married, because when do you know that? When do you know yourself well enough to know when you should prioritize yourself over somebody else? Of course, children go through this period of time where they are only focused on themselves. And then they become adults and you have to start considering other people and other dynamics. And then when do you go back to knowing and just being yourself? When do you go back to just being able to be like, I know myself enough to know that the frequency of this particular behavior or the intensity of this particular emotion will break me. Like, it will break me.
I think when you're in it, you don't know. I think, and I was going to say, that's why you have your friends and your community as like guardrails. They keep you from crossing too many lines in a lot of cases, particularly with me. And I remember the conversation very vividly. We were in the gym, LaNail, and I started to complain.
Shit, I knew it was me.
You knew it was coming. And you was like, all right. And when that was your reaction, I was like, I have said this too many times and not made a commitment to action. Either you need to do something about it or shut up because you're dealing with it. You must be good with it. Mm-hmm. So we need our community. We need their feedback, healthy people in our community who love us. We need their feedback to kind of serve as guardrails.
Yeah.
LaNail done probably gave everybody the okay.
Mm-hmm.
Once
okay.
Oh yeah.
All right. Okay. You know, it's so I got PTSD from that. Okay, so every time she says okie dokie in text, I'm like, oh shit.
Me and Dee, we're talking about Dee. What was that about a month or so ago? We were talking because she was like, what? Okie dokie, what is an okie dokie? Like, is that okay? You all right? Or is that whatever?
That okie dokie has so many meanings to it.
I was gonna say, I think there's layers because you'd be like,
sometimes I see it and I'm like, all right, bitch.
Right. I take it as the positive, like, oh, okay. So that I don't pigeonhole and go down the rabbit hole because my brain, as I learned in Jamaica, can go way too many places I don't want it to go. So that's a story for tomorrow. But yeah, it can. Yeah, it can have a lot of meanings. The first time I saw you do it, LaNail in text, I was like, oh, shit. Being like Kurt. I was like, but no, that's not really her. She would just say if she was being Kurt. I said, okay, so I'm just gonna assume this is just a positive. Like, okay, cool. And I just kept going. And so, but I chuckle a little bit every time I see it. I'm like, okay, they're gonna know okie dokie.
Okie doke.
Right. I'm like, okay, there she goes.
I don't have time for your bullshit or your indecisiveness or whatever. So, okay.
Yeah, it could be that.
I'm gonna move on. Yeah.
Anyway, we go back to the idea. You said something now that I think is important that I don't want to get away from is, should we prioritize ourselves over other people in relationships, right? Because I think, as we talk to the girls about freeze your eggs, know the natural consequences, prioritize yourself. Of course, I'm going to be the one that says, yes, you should prioritize yourself. But I'm actually curious from you all who especially have been in these like bonded relationships, and I mean legally bonded relationship, not just a relationship, but like you signed papers, you stood up, you sent out the wedding pictures so the whole society knows, you know, I'm almost like, of course you prioritize yourself, but maybe you don't, you know, like, how do you prioritize the relationship over prioritizing the individual people in the relationship?
It's challenging because it goes back to what, you know, Jonai mentioned. I think all of us did, what we've been taught. So that is actually still a fear of mine in my present relationship, is being so you know, loving and not wanting to be too accommodating, where I'm not prioritizing myself. So the first marriage, absolutely did not prioritize myself. The second one, for a time I didn't. And then when I started to, it was like, oh yeah, no, this ain't gonna work for me. And you all kind of hit the nail on the head, where it's like, you then start placing yourself at a higher level, because now once he started impacting my emotional, you know, safety and how I felt safe emotionally and mentally because of what I had learned, then I started protecting myself, which meant I was now making myself a priority versus him and his feelings. And so, you know, that can happen because we learn spiritually, and somebody will tell me if I'm wrong, it's God, your spouse, then your kids, right? And then everything else, like not you, not even under God, it's God, your spouse. So if you grew up in just any traditional Christian base, faith, and that's what you're being reinforced. And then the whole concept of, women submission, right? And being submissive and what that means. And even when it's sold as not being negative, it's, oh, he's the head of the household. And, they're making the final decisions. So you have all of these factors that are subconsciously playing into how could I make myself a priority? So even, but how do you unlearn decades of programming? And we still get the programming through TV, social media, like we still get that programming wherever we go. It's different, right? Because the world is slightly more, although not where it needs to be, accepting of other types of relationships and love looking differently. But it's just that programming, because even now it's when there's conflict or disagreement, it's, I feel that wanting to go back into kind of that passive, careful, taking care of the man. And I'm like, okay, where am I really taking care of my own emotions because I'm so concerned with his? Right, that happens. Yeah. So it is difficult. I think it's a behavior that has to be intentionally unlearned, but not be selfish. Because then how do you do that without not being selfish, where you're only focused with yourself? So where's the balance? How do you balance that out of making yourself a priority, but also making this person a priority as well? Like how do you find, okay, I said balance again a couple times.
Yes, you did. And and our next grown ass woman, I'm keeping an actual tally. I'm gonna keep a note card with the tally, because I'm like, she said, how do you keep the balance with the balance? Okay, yes, that's gonna happen. You gonna balance something out.
Haters gonna hate.
Listen, okie doke. Go ahead.
I think now that prioritizing ourselves and self-care and all those things are
trending.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah.
And now that that's here, I think when you're already in a relationship, or if you are going into a relationship, that now these are things to consider, right? Things that we need to talk about with our partners and our friends, and whomever we're spending that significant time with. What does that mean? What does prioritizing you look like for you? Like, what does that mean to you? It can't mean, because you're doing all these things and then you get into these arguments and you're like, and the person's like, you don't even care about me, such and such, because everybody treat everybody the same. Whatever comes up in your disputes or disagreements, those things were never talked about. So everybody's upset about something they didn't even know. Yeah. So, one, you probably didn't know that you needed me time. I had a therapist tell me that one time. I was like, I'm good. I don't need any me time. She was like, yes, you do. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Okay.
You know what? Bye.
So I think now these days it's just more conversation to have. Like, what does being a priority to me look like, or to you? How is it? How do you feel? What does that mean for you? And now you got to know how you can accommodate, if that's a natural thing for you to give this person what they need in that way. Is there something that you want to learn how to do, or is this a non-negotiable for you? Like, oh, nah, I ain't, and I won't,
And what's interesting about the I'm sorry. Ooh, Jay, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just ad-libbing.
Should have said okie doke.
What's crazy about that selfish thing is that it shows up in the most weird ways, right? Like, you could have a partner that lets you have all the self-care time that you want, but their selfishness will show up in a way that could still be detrimental to the marriage. Mm-hmm. I think for me, one example, you guys all know the person that I was dating before I met Megan. And she was really she cared a lot about what I wanted to do and my goals and all of that. But I remember one of the statements, because she made a few in this short amount of time, but one of the statements that let me know that it was time for our relationship to end was when she said, "I'm gonna start prioritizing me." And she used that as a weapon. So it wasn't that she was using that to increase her own me time or self-care time or anything like that. Basically, what she was communicating in that moment was, I no longer give a fuck about you. And I'm going to make that known, and I'm going to couch it in this, I'm going to prioritize me. And so luckily, I was keen enough to what she was trying to say to understand the direction that she was trying to go in, right? Because that became a moment of gaslighting if later I said something and she was like, I'm just prioritizing myself. No, that's not what you're doing. You're trying to actually cause some issues for us. And so I think it's a matter of like throwing that conversation out with your closest friends or your family members to get some additional people to give insight about what that means. What's the interpretation of that? Nonetheless, I am a person who does prioritize myself, primarily because there is so much responsibility that's placed on me that if my cup is empty, I cannot give anything to anybody else, right? I can't be a good mom if I'm exhausted. I can't be a good spouse if I'm hungry. Y'all know if I don't have no food, I'm probably gonna say something that's not proper, right? So I can't go through my day with my staff and be inspirational or motivating or even aware of certain things if I haven't worked out in that morning. Because that morning I worked out and then I got a sense of accomplishment. That morning I worked out and I connected with my community. That morning I worked out and I got fresh air. And that filled me up so that I could go out through the rest of my day and give to others, right? And take care of others or whatever the case may be. So I do prioritize myself. One of the things I've always done, especially when the babies were small, because they're not babies, Alyssa grown, at least she thinks so. I woke up before everybody else in my family, and I still wake up before everybody else in my family does, because that's my time to do what I want to do for me. And so it doesn't necessarily mean I go on all these vacations without my family, aside from our trips that we take together. So it doesn't, I think it's this idea of what prioritizing yourself actually looks like, to make sure that it doesn't necessarily have a consequence to your family, but it also allows you to fill your cup. So I wake up before everybody, which also means I go to bed early. Not before everybody, but everybody in the house now needs to go to bed or get quiet at a certain time, right? So I think it's a matter of like how we prioritize ourselves, and that there should not be a consequence to our spouse, or our partner or our children in that process. Go ahead, Jay.
So I definitely think that all comes with a conversation. It shouldn't happen when I decide this is what I'm doing, and I don't care what you have to say about it, because I'm prioritizing me and whatever. So and depending on who you're with, you got to know your audience too, right? So if you are with somebody who also is just like you, and you guys are kind of like, yeah, when I'm doing this is what I'm doing, and everybody's okay with it, whatever. But I think with the conversation, especially if you actually know yourself, like, you need those things. When you get to this level, I know I'm going to be like this if this doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. I think that should make it a bit easier to communicate, to have those conversations with your partner, so that you all have some sort of understanding about what's actually needed. So it's never just like sprung on a person and now it feels like I'm a non-factor, because you want to do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So again, it's about what does prioritizing mean to you and your family, and I think it's also about timing as well. So sometimes it's not like, I'm not saying that you can't do these things, but maybe talk to me too about what I have going on so that we can figure out a schedule of how to get other things done. If you're not going to be here today and I need to be here, then I need to know that before 30 minutes prior. Or, prioritizing to me might mean if you get offered 100 hours of overtime, that maybe you only work 50, so you can spend the rest of the time with me, or you know, some sort of balance there.
That was for Nikki,
But
huh?
I just
Right.
Sorry, Jay, you said so some balance there, and I thought you said that for Nikki. We hadn't heard the word in a few minutes.
Oh, I meant it though. I meant balance. That's what I was saying.
10-13, LaNail. 10-13 for you. Okay.
Okay.
The tomb is closed.
She
The
has
tomb is
risen.
closed till 10-13.
But yeah,
But I agree, Jay, which then goes back to conversations that we had a couple grown-ass women episodes ago around the importance of communication in relationships, which then goes back to the conversation of self-awareness in relationships. And what I find is a lot of people are moving in this world without fully knowing who they are. And I'm not saying that there's anything particularly wrong with that. I do think that people should go to counseling or they should go to coaching to kind of figure those elements out, to decipher between and sift out some conversations and elements. But even if we're talking about what age you should get married or what factors should lead to a particular divorce, to me, the root of all of that is still self-awareness. It's a matter of, who am I? What can I handle? What can I not? What makes sense to me? What does not? What have I communicated? What have I not? And that's the issue, that I think a lot of people are just moving. They just moving, and ain't nobody sitting and thinking. Nobody is sitting and thinking like, who am I? What drives me? What motivates me? What discourages me? What makes me feel isolated? But we will sit and we will study our bosses. We will sit and study education to get a particular degree. We will sit and study our spouses so that we could know them before they even say something. If they look like this, that means they want croissants. You know, we will study all of that, but we won't study ourselves. And then we're sitting there like confused, like what the hell? But you don't even know who you are. So how are you getting married? How are you getting divorced? How are you doing any of this? And you haven't taken the time to study yourself. And I'm not saying that people have to do that for 4 years of concentrated learning the way we go and get a bachelor's degree. But I do think that there has to be some very intentional time around sitting with oneself and figuring out oneself before they can even involve somebody else in the situation.
Yeah.
And it should be consistent. It's not a one-time check the block, oh, I know who I am. You need to check in constantly and
Yes.
always with yourself, to make
Yes.
sure you know who you are and your actions align with that. Because you
Yes.
can know who you are, but be doing all these things that don't make sense for what you
Yes.
want.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
and that would be one of those things where, Yanni, we all of us, but talking about what we would say to young people, it would be freeze your eggs and take time to study yourself. Like freeze
Yes.
your eggs, start budgeting, because my dude, when you start getting some real money and you ain't budgeting, you be looking back. Okay, I'm talking about me. I'm not talking about y'all, but I be looking back over how much money I could have had and what I got to show for it, which is really a whole bunch of fancy toilet paper. You hear what I'm saying? Like, it ain't shit. So I be sitting there like, save your eggs, create a budget, and get to know yourself. Like, get to really know yourself before you try to bring somebody else up in the equation.
Yeah.
to say, oh, go ahead, D.
No, that was me, but I wasn't saying anything.
Sorry. Huh?
No, that's you, Jay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and this is going back to being in different types of relationships. And can your non-negotiables in one relationship be negotiable in another one?
Absolutely. Because every relationship isn't the same. And for me, there's parallelisms between my closest friends and my marriage. It's not all the same, because I'm not backing that thing up on y'all, but I might, never mind. I'm not. I just want to watch. But anyway, there's some things there's some parallelisms, but then some relationships, you don't live with your homegirls, but you live with your spouse. if I'm with you guys, maybe this is TMI, but if I'm with you guys and you guys pass a little gas every now and then, I might be annoyed and roll down the window. When it happens with my spouse, I'm like, you could leave a goddamn room. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's some things that you could deal with from some people because it's not constant. It's not frequent enough. There's not this intensity. And then there's some things you can't.
Well, I'm talking about more so in a relationship with a partner, somebody that you live with. So from one partner to the next partner. So if you have two marriages, and do you think you can get through cheating in one marriage and not the other? Or there's some things you will tolerate from one husband, but not from the other?
Absolutely, because in that process, you have evolved too.
Nikki's nodding vigorously.
I think so, because in that process you've evolved, right? So what was acceptable in one situation is not in another, or what wasn't acceptable is now acceptable because you have more understanding and context and things like that. But with Nick, go ahead, Nick, because I didn't want you to go ahead, tell us.
No, I was just agreeing. I mean, absolutely. You're I was
that neck.
I was agreeing. No, you absolutely can. To LaNail's point, you evolve, and I would never be. I am not married to this person, and I could tell you, I wouldn't be quick to walk away. Mm-hmm. And they do things that irritate the living shit out of me. Mm-hmm. That number two would do that or something similar, because they're different people, right? And I'm like, I don't know if I can live with that forever. I mean, it really can. I mean, yeah. So, and then two, you got to think about, what is infidelity? Is it only physical? Is it, emotional as well? So infidelity it can be defined differently, right? Is flirting infidelity? It depends. Like, that's a whole topic as well. Like, what is cheating? And what were the circumstances around it? Were you all not in a good place and he got caught up, or she got caught up cheating, or talking to somebody else, and it was just, I don't know, so it depends. But like, I mean,
if you're in the same sort of situation, the same thing happens in both relationships the same way. Mm-hmm. You both was at the year mark, or whatever it was. That's so similar.
Year and a half. Yeah.
Do you think that you can?
Absolutely.
Are your non-negotiables just straight across the board?
No. Or do they? Because even when you think about friendship, though, like LaNail was saying, like, people, the person you're interacting with is different, right? Yeah. So you relate to them differently, and they relate to you differently. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, like, the things you can take with some people that you can't take with other people. And I mean, it could be psychological. It could be, like, I don't know what that process is in our own minds. We all could be sitting around fooling ourselves for all I know. Right? But there is some truth to, you will accept certain things from some people that you won't in others, because the truth is, and I loathe to say it, some people you just love more, or you care about more, or you're invested more.
You have more chemistry.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You have more chemistry, right?
And that
so you're like, you know what? I'm willing to work through this because I love this person a little bit more than maybe the first person that did it, where you were like, nah,
love as much.
It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it.
And think about, like, if someone fulfills you, however you define that is not something, and at this stage in life and the experiences you've had in dating, and the value that you place on that person, it is difficult to just not try to see if you can work through it, right? Work through whether that was infidelity, and it could be the circumstances of the infidelity. That's why I said it depends on what, you talking about STDs and stuff like that. Bye. But I mean, but even then, there's some
maybe, right? I know some people.
Yeah, that would still stay through that. It depends, but when someone provides you with a level of satisfaction that you have never obtained or had in any other partner, and for some that could just be physical and that doesn't make it right, but when you believe that you're fulfilled and you may love this person more, you're probably gonna fight a lot harder and put in a lot more effort to stay stay in that relationship and try to make it work and keep them around and see how to keep them around, or reflections, whatever it is. So
yeah. D?
No, I was just gonna say, to your point, you've changed. When you see this same behavior at the same point in time, Jay, the same thing, you are different from the first experience. So anything that you take to make that second decision is based off of your experience the first time, and whether you regret it, whether you feel like you could have gave them a little, some more time, or things you could have reacted different. There's more factors to inform your decision on the second time, which may lead to sustaining it, or making another decision.
Yeah, I think I agree with everybody. I think it's probably 50-50 care, 50-50 where you are in your experience, because back in the day you might have been dating two boys at the same time and they both was trifling as hell, but you liked one better than the other one, maybe because it was more fun, or
one bought you the Reebok Classics and the other one bought you the K-Swiss.
The Princess Classic.
Yep. The print, not the high top, but I wanted the high top double strap
with the toe print on the side.
with the toe print on the front.
I was not a sneaker person. I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
You know what K-Swiss are, and
yeah, they got the 3 lines, right? They kind of, or is it 3 or 4?
We can't be.
Huh?
They have a crest. K-Swiss is a crest.
Yeah.
Adidas
don't have the lines on the sides.
They do. They do, but it's
about 6 of them.
They do, but they're all white. They're all white with the lines on the side. They got the thick. They had a 40-year-old boundary laces.
Okay.
Not the kids laces.
Kids ain't do well for my flat feet. The ancestors gave me these slave cotton field feet.
Kids ain't do well for nobody's feet.
Right, to nobody's feet, not just yours.
You could have had angel's feet.
Right, been fluttering about. They still wouldn't have done well for you.
Take them kids off and walk barefoot.
Exactly, right? That's what we should have been doing.
Well, look, go ahead, LaNail. I was gonna say, in sake of I know we're a little after 8, and I promised my daughter that I would cook her dinner. We'd cook dinner together.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. I was about to wrap us up and say that this was a good conversation, and I love the way we did it this time, where it was 2 topics that we really went deep on. You know what I mean? As opposed to addressing all these, and I know those that are listening to us are watching us. Like we only record grown ass women 6 times a year, right? But again, these are conversations that we're having all the time amongst this particular group, and then we get to bring it with you guys and deepen our thoughts. So we're hoping that you guys are also taking some of these conversations and thinking really deeply about them and journaling about them and praying about them, or doing whatever you do to get your own processing and understanding, but then also taking them back to the other grown-ass women that you kick it with, or the grown-ass men that you kick it with, and have these different kind of conversations, because they're part of your village too. So to my grown-ass women friends, thank y'all always for being on this journey along for all of us, because we all benefit from this. And then for those who listen to us and watch us and process us, thanks for trusting us to be conversation starters for you, or to be the ones who invoke new thoughts or new questions to challenge ideas and such. So I love y'all. I'm gonna see y'all tomorrow. The audience don't know when tomorrow is, but I'm gonna see y'all tomorrow. So make sure y'all come dressed comfy, and we are getting ready to watch some Down in the Valley Where the Disconnect is. And that's it. I love y'all.
Love you guys.
Love you guys.